Hello, hello, my friends. All right, December, fucking December. I don't know about you guys, but I'm still fucking processing 2020, and somehow it is almost 2023. So, here we are. December looks good, right? I mean, not that we have any say in whether it's good or bad, right? We're just kind of trapped in this clock, but we start the month in Sag season, right? As we do every year, which I think, I don't know if you're anything like me, the start of Sagittarius season really kind of lifted a lot of the darkness of Scorpio season. I mean, this is a shift that we go through every year, Scorpio into Sag, right, in November. But this year's Scorpio season felt a lot heavier to me than usual. And I think mostly because of the eclipses playing out there, the energy was quite intense. And, Scorpio energy is intense anyway. Having a whole bunch of eclipse energy kind of interwoven did not help at all. So most people that I've spoken to had a little bit of a rougher Scorpio season than they're used to. So the Sag energy moving in has definitely been a breath of fresh air. And in December, we will continue with Sagittarius themes for a while until the planets start moving into Capricorn. So let's talk roster, and then we will get into all of the details as usual. So we start the month of December with the sun at 8 degrees of Sagittarius, and we will end the month with the sun at 9 degrees of Capricorn. So typical month, right? Mercury, wait till you hear what Mercury has in store for us. Oh yeah, another fucking retrograde. He starts the month at 21 degrees of Sagittarius, ends the month at 24 degrees of Cap, retrograde. We're going to talk about him more. Venus, she's under normal conditions for the duration of the month. She's starts at 18 degrees of Sag and ends at 26 degrees of Capricorn. Mars is retrograde for the entire month still. He's going to be retrograde for a while. And he's actually covering some ground in December because he's been really not making much progress at all. But now he's going to be trucking backwards in the wrong direction, but at least it's movement. He starts the month at 18 degrees Gemini, ends the month at 9 degrees of Gemini. Jupiter, one of our big movers this month, not in terms of distance, but he is changing signs again. So we're going to have a nice little chat about him. He starts the month at 28 degrees of Pisces and ends the month at 1 degree of Aries. Big deal. Saturn, again, fairly recently off of his retrograde, gonna start to make some more progress, right? He had made it down to 18 degrees of Aquarius, where he sat forever. He only made it to 19 degrees in November, but he starts the month of December at 19 degrees of Aquarius and ends the month at 22 degrees of Aquarius. So he will start to cover some ground again, which will be nice. Uranus spends the entire month in Taurus retrograde, 16 degrees to start, 15 degrees to end. His retrograde will be drawing to a close relatively soon, not in December, but eventually. Neptune will spin direct. We'll talk about him. He spends the entire month at 22 degrees of Pisces, retrograde to start, but very, very soon into the month he spins direct as well. And then Pluto, doing his Pluto thing out in Capricorn. He will tick off a degree finally. So he's been at 26 degrees of Capricorn forever because of his most recent retrograde. But he will finally get to 27 degrees of Capricorn, which you may or may not remember if you've been following me for a while, is the United States Pluto return degree. So he is coming back for another round of bullshit at the 27th degree of Capricorn. I believe this will be his final time there. This will be his third time. He went over once, retrograded once, and then he will come back again. And I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to talk about him again in the future because I haven't really looked, but I'm pretty sure this is the push that will actually bring him into Aquarius. I feel like I remember reading recently that March of 2023 will see Pluto skirt into the 0 degree of Aquarius for a little while. And he's going to retrograde back in Capricorn. He's not completely done with Capricorn yet, but Pluto into Aquarius is a big fucking deal. Pluto coming through these last degrees of Capricorn is putting the finishing touches on the destruction of the patriarchy and all of the things Capricorn. Pluto into Aquarius will be the actual revolution, fucking finally. So yeah, gonna be fun to watch and or participate in. Okay, So let's see. So that's roster. That's where everybody starts and stops. Lane changes, fairly typical with the exception of Jupiter. He doesn't switch signs every month. So we've got Mercury moving into Capricorn on the 6th. We've got Venus moving into Capricorn on the 9th. They're traveling pretty tightly together. They do actually, Mercury will start to gain some distance on her, but then he slows down to retrograde towards the end of December, and Venus catches right up to him again. So, you know, they're dancing right now. The 20th sees Jupiter into Aries, which again, we will talk about more in a little while. And then the 21st, of course, the solstice, no, the equinox. No, the solstice. Oh, I always fuck these up. The solstice. Winter solstice. Sun into Capricorn. Days start to get longer again. Thank fucking God, because I live in the, you know, in the freaking bowels of Massachusetts, and it starts to get dark. In the next month or so, it's going to start getting dark at like 4 o'clock, which is a special kind of hell. So I always look forward to the solstice every year in December. So interestingly, so Jupiter, again, we're going to talk a little bit more about him in a few minutes, but what I noticed when I was kind of mapping out the month is that as the Sun, Mercury, and Venus move from Sagittarius into Capricorn this year, they're actually going to square Jupiter on the way in, because Jupiter, in the case of Venus and Mercury, Jupiter will still be at the 29th degree of of Pisces. So obviously 29 degrees of Sagittarius squaring 29 degrees of Pisces. So as those two planets move into Capricorn, they're going to be expanded pretty hard by a square from Jupiter. And then the Sun will do the same thing. Although by the time the Sun moves in, Jupiter will have just moved into Aries. So that square will go off in the cardinal signs, in the beginning of the cardinal signs. So it's an interesting pattern to kind of consider as we're considering just the move from Jupiter from Pisces back into Aries for good this time anyway, because those personal planets, Mercury and Venus, and then the Sun moving in will definitely highlight, it's kind of like it's almost like a cross-pollination is the word that's coming to me right now, where it's, you know, Jupiter's move from Pisces into Aries will be highlighted by the fact that 3 planets will hit, you know, as that's happening. But also as the planets move into Capricorn from Sagittarius, you know, definitely noteworthy that Jupiter's there kind of gatekeeping, right? So whatever that means, definitely pays to kind of look at where those cusps exist in your chart, right? Where is that 0 degree of Capricorn for you, right? That the cusp of, what is it? I can't remember what the name of that cusp is. Sag to Capricorn. And then the one from Pisces into Aries also. So paying attention there. If you got anything in that area, you're definitely getting lit up like a fucking Christmas tree this month. So, all right. Let's talk about, we'll go in order. So Neptune direct, I think, is sequentially the first major shift that we will experience come December. So Neptune will spin direct at 22 degrees of Pisces, and that happens on the 3rd of the month, so very, very early on. Neptune has been retrograde in Pisces since the 28th of June. So as of the 28th of June, Neptune had reached all the way up to 25 degrees of Pisces, and on that date, he spun retrograde and has been retrograde ever since. And so for about 6 months, a little less than 6 months, we've had Neptune retracing his steps from 25 degrees down to 22 degrees of Pisces. Now Neptune, of course, very strong in Pisces, right? It's the sign that he is the, you know, he's the modern ruler of Pisces. Boundaries dissolving all over the damn place, right? And this has been the case for a while. Neptune is very slow. He's been in Pisces forever. He's got quite a ways to go still. So we're gonna have Neptune in Pisces for a while to come. But this is this transit, wherever it's happening in your chart, you are experiencing quite a protracted period of having the ground really shift beneath your feet, right? Neptune in Pisces is making it really, really hard to put down any type of solid foundation, right? For me, this is happening in the 7th house, which is fucking phenomenal, let me tell you, because, you know, if I have one more failed relationship, I swear to God. It's just, it just doesn't work, right? Things seem to be one way and then they're not. And this is just my personal hell as a Virgo rising. Pisces is my 7th house, which is, shitty in and of itself, but having Neptune in there, and Jupiter in there now too, is also, put it this way, the highest possible potential is there, but it's so hard, right? It's just so incredibly hard to achieve it because human beings, as a rule, we just suck. So this is going on for you somewhere, right? Somewhere in your chart. And it pays to kind of know that because it can be very, very frustrating and discouraging to have things continue to fall through the cracks when you are genuinely trying to do everything in your power to, to call in abundance in that Pisces area of your chart, wherever it sits. Neptune is kind of just not fucking having it, right? So, but another chapter of that is coming to a close on the 3rd, right? So Neptune retrograde, Neptune in general rules things like our intuition, our dreams, our spidey senses, right? He is, and when he's moving forward, we tend to, not that it's easy to do, because it certainly isn't. Neptune's energy is never easy to work with because, again, it's like that idea of just sand, like kind of falling through your fingertips. You can't, it's very, very hard to concretize or solidify his energy. But at least when he's moving forward, there is some ability to trust, right? To trust the gut, to trust the intuition, to trust the dreams, right? To kind of feel like you're moving in the right direction. When he retrogrades, which he has been doing since the end of June, what tends to happen is that an area of focus in this area, like an area of intuitive focus or a dream or something, some ideal, becomes much more concentrated, right? So you're able to focus on it more. However, you are simultaneously unable to trust yourself in this particular area, right? So it's a complete mind fuck. Again, using kind of myself as an example, without getting into too much personal detail, Neptune in the 7th house, for me, is all about partnership. And of course, partnership does not have to be romantic, right? Sometimes it manifests for me as romantic relationships. Other times it's more about, business partnerships or literally any situation where two souls are working together towards a common goal. And there are, there is, in the past 6 months or so, there is a specific partnership that has come into focus for me. But it's been very, very difficult to define, right? And that's fine. Like, that's exactly where it's supposed to be. It doesn't make it any less frustrating though, right? And so looking forward to this shift, because I think that it's going to bring into focus more exactly how this particular partnership will look. And again, this will be different for you unless you're a Virgo rising like me, and Pisces makes up your 7th house. You want to pay attention to where Pisces falls. I wrote notes here. Intuition, psychic perceptions, dreams come into focus, but we question them. Things get murky. Clarity returns, kind of. That's what I wrote. Clarity returns. So when Neptune moves forward, expect there to be some modicum of clarity that returns, although I hesitate to say that because Neptune is never really clear, right? That's kind of his MO, is that he muddies the waters regardless of whether he's moving forward or moving backwards. So don't discount him. Don't think that something all of a sudden is just going to like magically, present itself as like, oh, right. That can certainly be how it happens, right? It can be that like all of a sudden you realize like what's in front of you. But I will say that with Neptune, it's more likely, it is unfortunately more likely that when things come into focus, right, come into more focus when he spins direct, you're much more likely to be like, oh, I was tripping, right? Like, this fucking guy's not worth, or like, oh, this relationship isn't going to work out, right? Like, that's more often the case. Although I'm not, completely jaded. It is also entirely possible that you've been discounting something, right? That you haven't been seeing something for its true value. And that when Neptune goes direct, all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, right? This is clearly like exactly what I wanted, right? So, cleaning off those rose-colored glasses, but always being aware that Neptune slaps them on your face pretty hard. And so, there is always having to be just very cautious with Neptune energy around. So if you've got anything going on at 22 degrees of Pisces, any of the other mutable signs, so Virgo, Gemini, or Sagittarius, definitely watching out for this. And really anything in that range, right, 22 to 25 degrees, you want to be paying attention to. The shift will be noticeable, but I don't expect, it's not usually the case with these outer planets that like something happens like on that day, right? These planets tend to unfold as more chapters, right? So maybe more of a slow burn type of transit for you, but who knows, right? Anything's possible. All right, so that's Neptune. Neptune direct. Jupiter. All right, let's talk Jupiter. So on the 20th. On the 20th, we have Jupiter moving into Aries, back into Aries, right? Because he has already been there. Let me see. I write like these notes down that are so small. Like my handwriting is ridiculously small, and then I'm trying to actually see them when I'm talking, and I can't. So okay, let's see. Where did I write this? Okay, so Jupiter was into Pisces last year. And let's see, what did I write? Okay, May, here we go. All right, May 10th. So May 10th of this year, he made it into Aries, right? So he crossed the threshold from last degree of Pisces into first degree of Aries, which of course is a very important place. Now, obviously, anytime a planet changes signs, it's noteworthy. Obviously, anytime a planet as big as Jupiter, right, literally and figuratively, changes signs, it is extremely noteworthy, right? But this particular cusp, the cusp between Pisces and Aries, is particularly noteworthy because why? Because it is the alpha and the omega, right? Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. Aries is the first. And so this is it's a cycle, right? It is actually like a complete cycle around the natural zodiac that Jupiter completed, right? Or at least we thought he did, because on May 10th of 2022, he crossed over into Aries, made it all the way to, I think it was about 8 degrees. And then on the 28th, I'm sorry, that's not true. It wasn't the 28th that he spun retrograde. He spun retrograde in, I want to say July. Yeah, July is what's sticking out to me. But he backed up, right? So he backed back into Pisces, right? So, and that happened on the 28th of October. So since the 28th of October, he's been back in Pisces. Now, he didn't make it too far back into Pisces, only down to 28 degrees, at which point he spun direct again, and then he is already moving forward. And this month on the 20th, he will get back into Aries. Now, so the retrograde cycle, Jupiter's retrograde cycle, which is an annual thing, was very much caught up with his, with his move from Pisces into Aries, and that's kind of a big deal, right? It was be a big deal anyway. Jupiter from Pisces into Aries, right? But the fact that his retrograde took him back across that line, right, from Aries to Pisces, and will take him a third time back across that line, means that there is something. There's something here, right? And again, this is going to look different for everybody depending on where this particular line falls in your chart, right? Again, this for me is in my fucking 7th house. Hashtag blessed. But it's, there's a huge difference between Jupiter in Pisces and Jupiter in Aries. Jupiter in Pisces is in rulership. Jupiter is the ancient ruler of Pisces. Neptune is the modern ruler, but the two of them are still very, very strong there. So having Jupiter in Pisces is a very, very strong transit, right? I wrote down some buzzwords. Jupiter, of course, so, in general, Jupiter standing for things like luck, fortune, expansion, optimism, right? He's our greater benefic. But Jupiter left unchecked can veer into hedonism very, very quickly, right? It is not left to his own devices. Jupiter is going to show up in a positive way. However, it's rare that Jupiter's left to his own devices. It's very common to see him getting squared or opposed or whatever, right? In the natal chart, in mundane astrology, we're going to experience it in December several times, as I mentioned earlier, when Mercury, Venus, and the Sun cross the threshold from Sagittarius into Capricorn. All three of them are going to trigger Jupiter by square, which is a harsh aspect, right? Very common to see Jupiter show up as too much of a good thing when he's hit by harsh aspect. So it's tough because it's, you really can't discount Jupiter or make it feel like he's a bad planet by any stretch of the imagination, but he definitely can show up in a way that makes things feel entirely too big and or hedonistic, right? Like if you're veering into scenarios where you're having a really hard time controlling yourself or controlling the situation to the extent that that's even possible, Jupiter is often the cause of that. Jupiter in Pisces is about release and surrender, about peace, love, and sweeping shit under the rug. That's what I wrote, right? It's a very idealistic transit. Again, Jupiter being very, very happy here. He gets to kind of give everybody in humanity a big fucking hug while he's in Pisces. Oh, right. Super sweet. We love it. But then he moves into Aries, where it's a completely different beast, right? So Jupiter in Aries, Pisces is the sign of the collective. Aries is the sign of self, right? So automatically we have this kind of like narrowing of focus, which, to be honest, is not really something that Jupiter likes. Jupiter is expansive energy, and so he does much better in signs like Sagittarius, where he rules, or Pisces, where he also rules, signs which are about optimism and expansion, right? Aries is not. Aries is an initiator. It is very much an action sign, but it is the sign of self. And so there is a hyper focus on me when we get to Aries. So Jupiter in Aries is, I wrote down, the biggest of big dick energies, right? There is Aries people, if you know any, you know how they are, right? Like, I mean, I want to be nice. Because I love Aries people. It's not that I don't like them. It's just that there's a self-centeredness that comes along with it with Aries people. And again, it's not, I'm trying really hard not to be judgmental when I say that, because they're meant to be, right? It is the sign of self. So when you meet an Aries that isn't really kind of like, hey, I'm the fucking guy, right? Then something's wrong with that Aries, because they're supposed to be like that. That doesn't make it any easier to deal with when you're in a situation where you have to get them to kind of share or play nice in the sandbox, because they don't fucking do that, right? When Jupiter shows up and is now kind of pumping up this sign, what you're going to get is a whole bunch of people who, in the Aries sector of their chart, are kind of just like, no, there's no fucking room for you in my sandbox, right? Like, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to play alone. And if you fuck with me, I'm going to throw sand in your face, right? Like, this is what Jupiter in Aries is kind of going to bring to everyone, right? Not necessarily the easiest transit, although it is kind of noteworthy. And as always, it pays to know, where is this going down in your chart? Because there is going to be a very, very noticeable shift. And it shouldn't take you by surprise. The shift, because we've experienced the shift several times already, or 2 times already. This will be the 3rd. Again, the first time that Jupiter made it from Pisces into Aries was back in May, right? So the shift happened, and it got, there was a start, right? There was an initiation, but it misfired, right? It misfired somehow. And the suggestion with Jupiter having to move back from Aries into Pisces is that whatever initiation, it was initiation of self, right? Something very personal started to get off the ground in or around May, probably in the late spring, early summer, because again, these are bigger planets. They start off cycles, so it's not common to see them just like, oh, one day all of a sudden, right? But there's a new cycle that kind of started, and it involved very much striking out on your own. But you got a few steps into the journey and realized, fuck, I'm not equipped for this, right? I still have some baggage. I'm holding on to too much. I need to release some of this, or I need to go back and like make my backpack a little bit lighter, because there's no fucking way I'm going to make it through this entire journey if I have to carry this much weight. So Jupiter goes back, he goes back into Pisces, and he, hopefully causes some sort of release, right? Because there's something about this journey that you needed to shed some stuff. And that's what we've been doing since Jupiter made it back into Pisces in late October. Now that is ending, right? It wasn't a very long period of time, less than 2 months, that Jupiter's back in Pisces. But you know, it's time. It's going to be time starting on the 20th for him to move forward again. And this time he fires into Aries and it's for real, right? It's for real. He's not going to be backing into Pisces anymore. And in fact, he's not going to be in Aries for too terribly long either. He's only going to be here from the 20th to, I have May 16th, right? So May 16th is when Jupiter will leave Aries for Taurus. So we've got about, what, 5-ish months to really make that initiation and to get, you know, to get it off the ground and to do it right this time. Fun times. All right, last but not least, Mercury, fucking Mercury retrograde. Okay, so, you know, those of you who follow astrology might be wondering, hey, what do you mean another Mercury retrograde? We've already had 3 of those fucking things in 2022. And I would say to you, yes, you're right. We have already had 3. And don't we usually only have 3 Mercury retrogrades a year? At which point I would say to you, correct. We do usually only have 3 Mercury retrogrades a year. But not this year, because mathematically, the way that it plays out is that every 6th year, we have 4 of them. And this just so happens to be one of those years, right? So we are getting the 4th installment of Mercury retrograde. Now, the good news, if I can call it good news, is that it doesn't hit really until the end of the month. However, the shadow period starts relatively early in the month. And so most of December, we need to have this bad boy on our radar. So let's talk statistics, right? What is going down? All right, so Mercury retrograde number 4. The retrograde zone is 8 degrees of Capricorn to 24 degrees of Capricorn, right? So a big old chunk of Capricorn right smack in the middle is implicated with this particular Mercury retrograde, but it's only Capricorn this time. You may remember that all 3 of the preceding Mercury retrogrades this year have actually straddled 2 signs. Every single one of them has been a situation where we had they started in air signs and backtracked to the earth signs that immediately preceded, right? Which, I mean, will mean different things to different people, but for me, I always find that when Mercury retrogrades actually straddle 2 signs, they're even more chaotic, because there's chaos enough that comes along with Mercury being retrograde, but then when it like changes flavor in the middle, it's like, fuck that, right? Like it's just another thing. So there's consistency, at least with this particular Mercury retrograde, because the whole damn thing goes down in Capricorn, right? So step 1, isolating. Where do 8 degrees to 24 degrees of Capricorn fall in your chart? This is 5th house for me. Super fun, right? All right, so on the 12th of the month is when Mercury will enter the shadow. That means that Mercury will cross over that 8-degree threshold on the 12th. This is the pre-retrograde shadow. This is technically when the cycle starts, because as you know, if you followed me for any length of time, you have heard me lecture on this several times. So many people think that Mercury retrograde only occurs when the planet is actually appearing to move backwards in the sky. That is not the case, all right? That is actually the second leg of the cycle, 2nd out of 3. And so if you're only paying attention to that portion of the transit, you're missing the introduction and you're missing the resolution, right? And so it's really kind of no wonder that people struggle so hard with Mercury retrograde, because they're not really paying attention to the whole thing, right? The whole cycle is meant to kind of bring you into awareness, right? To kind of make you pause and back up on something in your life so that you can reevaluate it and rethink it, and then eventually move forward with it in a way that makes more sense and is more aligned. But if you don't know that that's what you're supposed to be doing, and you only pay attention to the retrograde portion of the cycle, then yeah, it feels like the universe is kicking you in the balls, right? Of course it does, because you're missing, right? You're missing 2/3 of the fucking lesson. All right, so enters the shadow on the 12th, makes it to 24 degrees of Capricorn on the 29th, and then spins retrograde on the 29th. Now, interestingly, as I noted earlier in the video, Mercury and Venus have been traveling very, very close to each other for a while now. But Mercury is the faster moving of the two. So eventually it is always the case that once, that Mercury pulls ahead, and that is happening, right? That's already started to happen during Sagittarius season and will continue to happen. However, ahead of his retrograde, Mercury will slow down again, right? Meaning that Venus, who's still traveling at full speed, will catch up to him again, right? And on the 29th, they form a conjunction because Venus just so happens to be hitting the 24th degree of Capricorn on the same day that Mercury is spinning to retrograde from there, right? So it's an interesting thing when you see the retrograde cycle starting on the same day that there's a conjunction, right? In this case with Venus. Now, this is, I'm gonna put this out there because so many people come to me with this, and I always kind of tell them that they're I don't want to say wrong. All right, very common if you are looking into Mercury retrograde and what it means. A lot of times you will read astrologers who say things like, "Oh, look out for old flames," right? Look out for old lovers. Look out for ex-boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever, right? And I kind of get irked at astrologers who say that because a lot of times people expect that that's going to happen during a Mercury retrograde. And I have to rein in their expectations because there's a lot of reasons why that won't happen. First and foremost, Mercury is not a sexy fucking planet, right? Mercury is thoughts, communication, transportation. That's it. He's not Mars, he's not Venus, right? He doesn't rule relationships. He rules communication in relationships, but he's not a sexual planet. So there's nothing about Mercury energy generally that would bring an old flame back into your life. There are situations where Mercury retrograde may result in that, right? For example, if Mercury is going retrograde in a love house, right? If Mercury's retrograding in your 7th house of partnership, if he's retrograding in your 5th house of romantic adventures, much more likely, or if one of your sexual planets is caught up in the retrograde, right? So say that you have Mars or Venus in the retrograde zone, there's going to be a period of time where Mercury is going back and forth over that particular planet, much more likely in those situations. But generally speaking, it's not wise to consider Mercury retrograde to be a planet or a cycle where an old love is going to come back, right? Possible, but rare, right? Maybe like 1 out of every 15 times. The exception, I think, is going to be this with this particular one because why? Because of the conjunction to Venus, right? The conjunction to Venus, she's going to be right there, right fucking there when Mercury turns to retrograde. And so she's going to, again, doesn't necessarily mean that an old flame is going to come back into your life. However, it's entirely possible and much more probable than usual. Now, Venus doesn't always manifest as relationships either, right? She's love, but she's also money, she's values, she's aesthetics. So there's lots of different Venus-themed issues that might come up for you during this Mercury retrograde. Definitely pays to understand that both Venus energy and Capricorn energy and Mercury energy all kind of need to be synthesized and then applied to your particular chart, right? What house is this going down in? 5th house for me. I'm real fucking psyched. I can't wait. Whoever he is, he's going to get a fucking punch in the dick because whoever he is, he's already been here. Okay, so retrograde from the 29th through the 18th of January. That is when Mercury will spin direct again at 8 degrees of Capricorn. And then, you'll hear everybody shouting from the rooftops on the 18th, "Hey, Mercury retrograde's over." And I'm going to sit back and fucking laugh as they all get nailed by the post-retrograde shadow, which is, again, the 3rd leg of the retrograde cycle. It is that final pass that Mercury will make in direct motion from 8 degrees back through 24 degrees of Capricorn when he finally exits the shadow on the 7th of February. Okay, so unfortunately, insanely common for people to get nailed by that post-retrograde shadow because they think that the transit is over when in fact it is not. I myself have gotten nailed several times by the post-retrograde shadow, so it's very real, folks. You definitely want to be paying attention. All right, so what does this mean? Well, results may vary based on where Capricorn sits in your chart. But Capricorn, generally speaking, is where we boss up, right? It's where we're most ambitious and disciplined in our lives. Capricorn is by far the most ambitious energy in the zodiac. And so it's a Saturn ruled sign. It is ideally where we are most disciplined, and or it is the place where we suffer the most if we allow our discipline to kind of fall, to fall short. I wrote, we could very easily get caught with our pants down at the office Christmas party this year, right? Because of the timing on this one. Travel plans, miscommunications, old flames, friends, etc., returning with a message, right? Hold on, I'm going to come back to that. Technology goes wonky, all during Mercury retrograde, very common presentations. The message and the messenger is really the theme that rings true for all Mercury retrogrades. If this particular retrograde brings someone back into your existence, be it an old flame or not, right? Remember the reason, right? The reason is because this person is coming back to deliver a message that you didn't get the first time around. There would be absolutely no reason for the universe to deliver this person into your experience if you got the message. And P.S., most of the time that message is that this person still fucking sucks. Or that you still fucking lack boundaries because you should have told this person to fuck off and not let this person actually come back into your existence, right? I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it is extremely rare to see a retrograde, especially a Mercury retrograde, bring a person back into your existence because that person was so good for you the first time around. Like, if that person was so good for you the first time around, then chances are they wouldn't have to return to your experience to begin with. And listen, no judgment, because I guarantee that I'll be coming back to watch myself say this to myself in a couple fucking months when I inevitably allow some dumbass back into my life, because that's literally where this is heading for me, especially with all the shit going on in my 7th house. So measure twice, cut once. That is today's advice, or December's advice. So lovely little month we have on tap. Enjoy the holidays for those who celebrate. Enjoy New Year, and I will see you in 2023, my friends. Ciao for now.